This conference will now be recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. I would like to call to, it's on, okay. Good morning. I would like to call this meeting to order. The Taos County Board of County Commissioners a special meeting Friday, May 13th, 2022, and it is 9:01 for the record. Madam Clerk, or Tammy, can you please call for the vote? For roll call? I don't think yes. Jim, can you hear us?
Here, present. I didn't hear her, but I'm present.
Present?
Present. Present.
Okay, next, Pledge of Allegiance, and Vice Chair, can you please? I'm sorry, put you in the, do the honor.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion from Commissioner Fambro and a second from Vice Chair. Call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Fambro,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brush,
Yes.
Chair Behill.
Yes. Citizens' concerns. For public comment, you can please phone in to 575-737-6310. Citizens wishing to speak shall limit their comments to 3 minutes and no action may be taken. Is there anyone wanting to make comments? Anissa? That's okay. Okay, so moving on to department matters. Discussion, consideration, and decision regarding the approval of resolution number 2022-28, a resolution amending section 8, leave, section 8-4, annual leave 3, and section 8, leave, section 8-415, Taos County Personnel Policy dated November 7th, 2017, with effective date of December 17, 2017.
Good morning, Chair Behill and members of the commission. Before you, Resolution 22-28. What this does is changes the dates in the effective sections of the personnel policy. So effectively what we want to do is change the sellback provision from December to June. So the way the ordinance currently reads, an individual that has an excess of 240 hours of annual leave can sell that back to the county, and it's up to the county manager. The mid-year doesn't quite work, one, because of the holiday season, because some folks are trying to scramble to take off, and then sometimes we need folks because of the holidays on the public safety departments as well. What we're doing is this would push back the 240 hours that you need to have 240 hours on the books on June 30th. If you don't, they'll use me as an example. So if I'm in excess of 240 hours at the cutoff date, I lose those hours. So, and then to sell the sellback provision, it makes more sense to do it at the end of the fiscal year, because you may have money in your department in December, but it doesn't mean you're gonna have money in June. So essentially we're just changing the dates on it.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner.
Madam Chair, could you define sellback?
Sellback is when an employee sends a notice to me. Now, this case, we're adding the Human Resource Department to the mix. So example of Mr. Jones had an excess of 40 hours above his 240, he would send me a memo saying, can the county buy back my 40 hours to get me below the 240? And then the county manager could either approve or deny it, but it should be based on budget sufficiency. So if the planning department had plenty of money in December, I might authorize the buyback of Mr. Jones's 40 hours, but that money might not be there in June. And this kind of also gives people a little bit more time, other than bucking up against the 4th of July holiday. There's not as much pressure. In November, December, you have Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve that you're trying to take off, and it affects departments. So Mr. Jones and others may want the Christmas holiday off to be with their families, but then there's other folks that are trying to also take it off to get below the 240. And so it puts a lot of pressure on us.
So it's not the same as giving your time to someone who's,
No.
and it's basically lost. The sellback is lost.
If Mr. Jones, if I denied Mr. Jones's request to buy back his 40 hours, he would lose that 40 hours. So finance would cut him off at the 240. So as an example, during the squall, the cutoff date was December 31st for everybody to use it or lose it. We did have some folks that want to sell back their annual leave. Then we extended it to February 28th because of the squall. And then it was still hard for folks to use their leave, so we pushed it back to June 30th. So we want the policy to match what I did administratively, and we think there would be less pressure in the month of December.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I will move to approve resolution number 2022-28, a resolution amending section 8, leave section 8-4, annual leave, and section 8, leave section 8.415 from the Taos County Personnel Policy.
Is there a second? Okay, there's a motion by Vice Chair and a second by Commissioner Fambro. Any discussion? No? None?
No, Madam Chair, I would just say thank you to the team for figuring out a system that is more efficient and more helpful to our employees. Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
You're welcome. And Ms. Elam took the lead on this.
Thank you once again. That's great. Call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Fambro,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brush,
Yes.
Chair Vihel.
Yes.
Okay, next we've got discussion, consideration, and decision regarding the approval of a memorandum of understanding between Taos County and AFS-CME Local 1193 for all bargaining unit employees with effective date of May 14, 2022. Mr. Jaramillo.
Thank you, Chair Vihel, members of the commission. Before you, we're requesting approval of this memorandum of understanding between AFSCME Local 1193 and Taos County. Effectively, what this memorandum of understanding agrees to is that for all bargaining eligible employees, that they would see a pay increase of 7.92%. Effective date is May 14th, 2022. This would coincide with the 1% plan individuals, and all county employees would see this pay increase effective tomorrow. There's no other changes to the bargaining unit. And we would continue as is with the bargaining unit. As you know, Ms. Elam tied this 7.92% to the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solution Consumer Price Index. And so that's how we arrived at the 7.92%. In your packet is that backup material for the 7.29%, as well as the sections of the bargaining, the collective bargaining agreement. We stand for any questions, and Ms. Elam is here if there's any questions that I cannot answer.
Any questions, commissioners?
So, just quickly, Madam Chair, if, Mr. Jaramillo, if you could just say the low end people who are making roughly $12.57, then will now be brought up to,
$13.54. So most of our employees, a lot of our employees start at $12.54, and they would come up to $13.54.
thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any idea how many fall within in that range? Are we looking at a large amount? Okay, that's fine, understand, yes. Commissioners, any other questions?
I provided this to you. It came back to me, I just happened to, because I was looking at it for housing. It's 28% of our total employees earn less than 14.64.
That's great, thank you for
Thank you.
that info.
Yeah, she's putting together an argument of how our employees can afford housing.
Absolutely,
So
great info.
I'm
Dave.
glad you have that with you.
Thank you. I just, oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Patty. That was 28% earn less than 14.
64, and the bottom threshold is 1050.
But there's
But we
nobody
don't-
earning 1050
Yeah.
anymore.
Okay,
Great,
good.
to know.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair. So, Brent, Mr. Manager, this now this is the follow-on to our meeting last week, right? If we could just like state that for the record, how everyone or like which groups of employees have been brought forward and when they will all see the changes. Just for the record, I think that's worth stating. Thank you.
For the record, bargaining eligible employees and those employees that are falling under the 1% pay plan will be receiving a pay increase. So for those two pay plans, everybody will be seeing a 7.92% increase. This also, the 7.92% also is the new, will be added to the starting wage of a position. So going forward after today, our advertisements will include a 7.92% follow-up. Well, it'll be adjusted to 7.92% as the new starting wage.
As well as the longevity, which is not on
Right.
today, but it
Right.
is part of.
So the longevity for the 1% plan folks went into effect with this last pay period, and those individuals will be seen at next week's paycheck.
Great. That's
And all the 1% plan folks have been communicated with via email by myself.
Thank you.
That is fantastic. I just have a comment. First of all, thank you very much once again. I'm going to say the same thing I said the last time, and that is that we do value our employees, and this is a start. And I want to thank the team here that has really diligently worked on how to get to this point. And I think it's important for everyone to know that we're not done yet. I know Ms. Elam is working really diligently on a compensation plan. And so we look forward to that, but we know, we all agree our employees are our biggest asset, and we want to make sure that they feel valued, and not only just feel valued, but that we do compensate them appropriately. So thank you all so very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Our most valuable asset.
Most, yes, you are absolutely right. Thank you. Commissioner Fambro. Okay, commissioners, what is the wishes? A motion? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Vice Chair Brush and a second by Commissioner Fambro. Please call for the vote.
Commissioner Fambro,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Brush,
Yes.
Chair Vigil.
Yes. So before we move on, and I'm not sure because I didn't mention this from the beginning, but I want to take a moment. You can tell me if I'm out of, or if it's inappropriate, but because we didn't add it to the agenda, can we take a moment of silence for the staff that have passed away? I think it's important that we recognize that we've lost some team members and family, what we consider family. So if we are all good with that, can we do that? Great. So let's take a moment, please. Can we stand? Thank you all. It's been tough. It really has been tough.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to comment on the last item. Mr. Jaramillo, if you could thank the union for working with us.
Very well put, Commissioner. Thank you.
Yes, thank them very much. Thank you.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so moving on, we are on work study session, discussion only, no action will be taken. Discussion regarding the draft affordable housing ordinance, and to present is Mr. Jones, please. Thank you.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Fambro. This morning, I'm pleased to introduce this work study opportunity to discuss the current draft of the proposed Taos County Affordable Housing Ordinance. It's the next step in Taos County's efforts to affect positive change in our local housing market following the adoption of the Taos County Affordable Housing Plan last summer. This draft is the culmination of months of work, mostly during little stints between reviewing applications and working on numerous other projects we are busy with in the planning department. Working on the ordinance piecemeal in this manner should not be viewed as a reflection on the importance of this issue for the planning department or the county in general. Oftentimes, due to the nature of handling many time-sensitive applications, appeals, and other issues that seem to pull us in many directions, some very important items get pushed aside. Affordable housing is a very important issue in Taos, as we have seen home prices and rents soar in the last couple of years, becoming more and more detached from local wages. During that same time, the housing stock has become diminished, and with that becoming more and more difficult to find a home or to buy or rent. This ordinance is relatively straightforward ordinance. It's based on the New Mexico Affordable Housing Act and drafted from the Doña Ana County ordinance that was provided by the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. The Taos County Affordable Housing Ordinance will codify the county's ability to circumvent the state anti-donation clause and leverage mortgage finance authority funding and programs in order to provide funding to qualified individuals, businesses, and nonprofit entities whose goal is to develop, build, and provide affordable housing within Taos County. Many of the items in this version of the ordinance we need to be here in order to satisfy NMFA requirements and the State Affordable Housing Act. Some areas where we have a little more discretion include the question of the affordability period, which is defined in the proposed ordinance under Section 3, Item B. As you can see in that section, the proposed periods based on the amount of the housing assistance grants start at 5 years and extend to 10, 15, or 20. We have verified from the Mortgage Finance Authority that we have the ability to set our own affordability periods, and I'd like to bring up the possibility for the consideration of the Commission that we set our base affordability period at no less than 10 years and go up from there in order to assure that anyone who is applying for these funds is committed to the concept of affordable housing. There are other items we may be able to add or areas where we can change the language, including creating incentives for qualified applicants who are willing to accept housing choice vouchers. But I want to keep this brief so we can hear from you, the Taos County Board of Commissioners, and get your feedback and guidance on this proposed ordinance. And with that, I stand for questions.
Questions, commissioners?
Madam Chair, I'll ask Mr. Jones a question.
Please do.
And Andy, I wanted to say thank you for putting the effort into finding where we have flexibility to tailor this to our community's needs and our community's goals and our team's goals. So thank you very much for not just, picking up same old boilerplate and putting it forward. I appreciate that a lot. And you mentioned some of the areas where planning looked into that was around the affordability period and creating incentives particularly for accepting vouchers. Are there other kinds of incentives that you think are important, or other areas in this doc that do kind of differ from the standard and the boilerplate? Other areas where you think that we have where it's advantageous to us to take advantage of our flexibility and discretion?
Sure. I think that in some of the definitions that they've left a little vague, I'd like to possibly clean some of that up. I did get confirmation this morning. I had a question into Mr. Daniel Macy at the Mortgage Finance Authority, and I had asked him specifically about the language. I believe it's regarding multifamily property. Let me see where that is. It's on page, it's in, all right, there's so many letters and numbers here, hang on. It's in item T. Oh, no, nope, not item T, it's item, hang on. Where is that? I think I can read it better on the paper. I think it's on page 7. Let me see, somewhere in the
very.
I had a question about where it mentioned something about just clause, giving landlords just referred to them having just cause to evict tenants. And I wanted to beef that up and maybe clarify that, because that seemed really vague. So I'll read the specific part. It says a single apartment within a multifamily property, qualifying grantees agree that if any single apartments are to be rehabilitated, weatherized, converted, leased, repaired, constructed, or otherwise are to benefit from affordable housing funds, those apartments shall be leased to persons of low or moderate income at the time of any such award. Qualifying grantees who are the landlords and or owners of such property shall further agree to contribute at least 60% of the cost of the rehabilitation, weatherization, conversion, lease, repair, and or construction. Qualifying grantees shall also agree that the persons of low or moderate income who are tenants of those apartments shall be allowed to remain tenants for so long as there are no uncured defaults by those tenants under their respective leases, and provided that there is no just cause for the landlord to terminate any lease agreement with those tenants. And so it's that no just cause part that I wanted to ask about. And Mr. Macy responded that he had looked at some other ordinances from other cities, towns, and municipalities. And he said a lot of those are vague as well when it comes to the just clause statement. However, a couple of them have expanded on it to include allowable grounds for eviction, including non-payment of rent, intentional damage to the unit, or other material non-compliance with the terms of the lease before they can evict. So I think that's something we could consider, adding that kind of language to make it a little more clear.
Yes.
Maybe another idea, Mr. Jones, is to add language in there to follow whatever the prevailing it's not sentiment, the prevailing issue at the time. Let's just look at the pandemic, and there's things placed in by the federal government or the state government to prevent eviction.
Right.
Some kind of
Right.
So any kind of emergency,
And then follow whatever
Oh, great idea.
pandemic or
Yeah.
or emergency clause that the state or federal government put in, or I don't know how the exact language, but you follow what
I do, yes.
Manager Hadamia, that's an excellent, excellent idea, because often we have to bring, those experiences that we've already encountered into these docs to protect going forward. Oh, sorry.
County manager's comment, I was gonna bring up that we hope we don't, but we may have FEMA vouchers in our marketplace, either because of this disaster or future fires. And I was gonna say the same thing, because sometimes FEMA vouchers can be used for affordable housing and sometimes they can't. We struggled with that on previous disasters I've worked on, so I wanted to throw that in. And the other thing is that we had language that said apartments, and sometimes affordable housing comes out in a townhome. And so I don't know if you want to change the noun from apartments to units, or just in case.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially.
Apartment and sometimes it's a townhome, because both of those qualify for those
Yeah.
terms.
And I think sometimes even, some type of single-family housing
Yeah, and I've
qualifies.
seen duplex,
Yeah.
I've also seen, believe it or not, garden homes, so unit could be a noun that you could use that would be more.
True.
inclusive.
Great, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. Any other
I think,
discussion, questions?
on the issue of vouchers, I had asked Mr. Macy specifically about that, if we could include some language where we could incentivize the acceptance of vouchers by landlords. And he said he saw no reason why we couldn't, but that to keep the language soft. And so
Right.
I had thought about including it just in the definitions section to use some kind of soft language where it's not sort of any kind of punitive action or anything like that, but to develop some measure to incentivize the acceptance of vouchers, because that's a huge issue in the
Yes.
community. Yeah.
Thank you for thinking of that as well.
Madam Chair, I have one other
Sure.
question.
Question.
And Mr. Jones, I'm just wondering, and perhaps the place for this isn't in this document, but I was wondering that if in your research or in your conversations, with the state, for example, around this, did you do any looking into the tool of deed restrictions to maintain, like you talked about the affordability period and longevity? I'm just wondering if you could comment a bit on that.
So I did have that question into Mr. Macy, and he was still working on that. And he comes from, he's kind of our point of contact, but he kind of comes from more of a finance background. And so he was, I think, going to talk to some of his colleagues at MFA and try to get a better sense of that. And it's certainly something I'm interested in, that the potential of that too, because I think it's clear that that's kind of a new trend. Colorado communities are looking at doing that or are doing that. And if you're not familiar with the concept, it's where a government entity will buy deed restrictions on a property. And so those deed restrictions will state that an individual who has, it can be any set of parameters, but it could be something like, I know one that I read in Aspen or Vail or, somewhere like that. They had set language that required that at least one tenant in the property had to be a permanent resident of the county or the municipality, and that they had to be employed in the county or municipality for a minimum of 30 hours a week. That was one, and I think we could tailor that any way we wanted to. But what that does is that takes those units out of the larger housing market and creates sort of just a local housing market based on local wages and the local economy.
That's great.
I think that would take a pool of money. And one thing I want to clarify is if MFA funds could be utilized for that. Yeah.
Okay. For the record, I do want to, Commissioner Gallegos is with us. Thank you. For the record. Yes, Vice
I
Chair.
am here.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Other questions?
Yeah, thank you for working on this, Mr. Jones. When you define transitional housing, is there a way to put language in related to those coming out of our jail and need some transitional housing? I don't know if you're able to do that, and then additional language that would include incentives to those who are now using their properties for short-term rentals, that if they were to convert to affordable housing or long-term housing for whatever, the local workforce, that we were able to give them some kind of a credit.
Mhm.
If we could just research
Sure.
that, because we've got to get a handle on this short-term rental market. And if there's an incentive that would encourage the locals and all these developers and management properties that are managing short-term rentals for people who live in Texas or out of state, if there was some language you could research that would provide incentives for the short-term rental market, that might help. I don't know if people would be willing. They're still going to make more money with
Sure.
short-term rental, but there might be some people have heart and aren't in it for the bucks and want to help us. So if
Right.
you could research that, I'd appreciate it.
Definitely. And I think to that end, that might be part of a larger carrot and stick approach, you know, where maybe this document or maybe a subsequent ordinance deals with that, but also a short-term rental ordinance that, you know, has higher fees, maybe puts a cap on the number of units, might provide an incentive for people to look for other alternatives too. And then if we have this incentive, like you suggest, that might be kind of a good way to transition those individuals into thinking about doing something different. Yeah.
And in relation to this ordinance, we've all been told we need to completely rewrite our land use regs, because these do somehow track with our land use regs. And this goes hand in hand. And I'm encouraging our manager to find a consultant, a contractor, not you, because it's too big of a task, but someone who can rewrite according to what we need and how we are not helping with the requirements of our land use regs, and how people hate us. I mean, a lot of people hate us because of these regulations, and that's got to change. We need to make it more friendly while protecting the environment and encourage more developers to develop, and we have to. So this goes hand in hand, and I'm really encouraging, and I hope the commission would support me, because this goes hand in hand with the affordable housing. If we do this, but we still have lengthy, terrible process on permitting, then our land use regs could defeat this. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And to that end, I would just add that our subdivision regulations are desperately in need of a rewrite too. They're actually, you know, last revision was 2006. And so I'd say they're even more out of date than our land use regulations. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fambro.
Thank you. To go along with what Commissioner O'Donnell was saying, when we were elected but we weren't sworn in, we sat through those meetings also when the land use regs were getting revamped and it was passed by the previous commission before us. And there was more emphasis put on anti-growth in that version that they passed than what was practical for the example she gave, and then to promote um, raising our GRT and keeping our mom and pops alive and things like that. I mean, so they listened to just the anti-growth portion of that, and that commission passed that, and it's really handcuffed us, and um, it doesn't work well with the locals.
Thank you, Commissioner Fambro, for that background. Certainly, we need a balance, right? We do
Definitely.
need a balance.
Mhm.
And so, Vice Chair, I believe you had some questions, and then I'll go over to.
I do have a question / comment, but I think Patty has a
Okay.
question to you. You can
Absolutely.
step up toward the mic.
I apologize, as you know, I was out for.
Patty, can you come up to the mic and then just say your name for the record? That way.
Patty Sunday, Director of Economic Development. I want to let you know I was out for a week at our son's graduation and Mother's Day. So I apologize that I didn't have time to meet with Mr. Jones so that I wouldn't keep interrupting with my suggestions. But one thing in studying the other municipalities and going to meet with all the mayors or village coordinators since I've been here, I wondered if we should have some language, other mayors and things, their towns own assets, right? The town itself will own the asset for affordable housing for their workforce, and it becomes a revenue source, or either it's a way to control and make sure that they have enough workers. So in case in the future, we might one day own a resource for whatever reason, for the film commission, who knows? I'm wondering if that should be put into the language too. We don't know that we will, but we might as we grow our economic base. So I wanted to throw that out. And then in that same reason for me being gone for like 8 days, I had been supporting county manager, and we've already had 2 Zooms with people to help on the regulations. You probably just didn't know that. So I had already been working with him on that team because, as you know, zoning and regulations are really important to economic development as well. So I want you to know we're on that, and I'm happy to brief you about it. You're welcome.
That's great. Thank you. And Vice Chair, please. Thank you for being.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for raising the point, Commissioner O'Donnell, and emphasizing it, Commissioner Fambro. And stop being so cute up there, please.
I love it.
Andy, I just wanted to sort of clarify what this is putting us on the path to, and what the next steps might be. Not to cut off any other further questions we might have, but just so I kind of know where we are. So with this, what an approval, which is not on the agenda today, of this ordinance will do for the county is, under the Affordable Housing Act of the state, this will basically open up more pathways for partnerships with state, with public-private partnerships, for us to use our funding in more flexible ways and to get more funding for our housing projects, correct? And then, okay, just wanted to say that in my own words. And then, so the next step after we're finished with our conversation this morning or this afternoon, however long it takes, then anything that you've heard today will get updated. Does it go to the state then for approval?
Yes, the next step would be, once we get a draft that everyone is happy with, that incorporates all the concerns and language, we'll give that back to MFA, and they have a little panel that will review that.
Okay.
Once they sign off on it, then we can bring it back to the Board of Commissioners for approval.
Okay,
I assume, actually, since it's an ordinance, it'll have to go to the Planning Commission and then to the Board of Commissioners, yeah.
And Madam Chair, if I could just ask a follow-up, which is totally unfair. Does the Planning Department have any sense how long that MFA approval process might take? And I ask that just because we all know this is an issue, and I, for one, am really grateful that in planning you all have prioritized this and really put the time into it. It's critical for our community. So this is just me being impatient, asking if you have any sense of the timeline.
I don't, and based on kind of some of our previous communications with MFA, it could be a quick turnaround, or it could be lengthy. But Mr. Macy did sort of lay out the process, and I think I think my assumption is that they're more prepared to set this up and do a quick turnaround on this than maybe he is as an individual to just answer my pesky questions.
I do have,
Sure.
if I may, Madam Chair. Ms. Sunday, do you recall I sent you that bill that was passed by the state, Private Public Partnership Act?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm wondering if it's allowed by legal that we incorporate that in this ordinance as a reference, because it does allow for green building credits, there's a whole formula that's way over my head for LEED and different, you saw it. Maybe you could briefly explain what that act does. It just gives credits to developers for green building, plus it's just other opportunities for us to partner. But
Yes, ma'am. I would ask if you would give me until another meeting so that I can give a full briefing and prepare a document. I read it very, very briefly, but I think that's a great point, as long as we're making this inclusive and comprehensive document to be prepared for the future of development at the same time. And the other comment you made about niche populations, you were talking about folks incarcerated. I wrote myself a note that I'll work on some text about niche populations as well.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, both Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Brush kind of scratched on this, but didn't quite land on it either. What this ordinance does is it gives the ability for the tax credit developers to have that mechanism to get the tax credits. So if we didn't have this document in place, nobody could use the tax credits. And I know those come and go, but we need this type of document in place for the tax credit developers.
So I just wanted to, I guess, make a comment in regards to, first of all, thank you. I know this is a lot of work, and we all get a little bit impatient. She's just really good at saying it very nicely, so we let her, she lays it out really well. But no, I just wanted to ask a question in regards to, obviously we try to think of everything we can possibly think of, but we might leave something out. And so just, do you know, is it simply, because we know documents are living documents, right? They change.
They change, right.
And so would it just be amending down the line? Do you know that process? I'm just curious.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I was going to go next, actually, is it could be, this specific ordinance could be amended. I was also having an email conversation with one of our attorneys, Ms. Corey Strife, yesterday. She reviewed the document. She had some good comments and questions. And she referenced that the city of Albuquerque, I can't remember if it was the city of Albuquerque or if it was Bernalillo County, but one of those two entities, they passed their, general affordable housing ordinance similar to what we have here. And then they went back and they created a second ordinance that dealt strictly with workforce housing. So I want to look at what they have for that, because this really is an enabling document. This is a document that will allow us to leverage those funds, to get funding, to create a pool of money, to avoid the anti-donation clause, and then we can build upon that. We can pass a short-term rental ordinance. We can pass a workforce housing ordinance. We can just get piles and piles of housing ordinances if we want.
Get creative, right?
Yeah. And so I think, and the question, I guess, maybe some of that down the road, we amend this document, or we add, or we just create standalone ordinances.
Thank you. That's great. That's great to know.
Thank you for bringing that up. Is there somewhere in here where we mention amendments and procedures? You could check with DFA that we can just make an amendment without having to go through a public hearing, or do we still have to go through?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's maybe it's not necessary to add some amendment language Maybe not. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I think we would defer to just our normal standard operating procedure with that. And, as we make amendments, we bring them back to you for approval. And I don't know if, and I would assume actually if we were to amend this document, we might have to run it back through MFA as well. But that I'll mark that down as another question for them.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I don't know. There were, when the town did their cannabis, they did an emergency clause to get it expedited. Are we able to do that once we get this ready or not? I mean, if you could just check in the legality of emergency clauses in this particular ordinance?
I don't think we can. It'd be 30 days after approval, it would go into effect. So Automotive Canada will ask Mr. Trujillo about it as well.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to ask Mr. Jaramillo, I believe the standard for emergency clauses is public health and safety. Is that? Yeah. And so, which there's a case, I think, that could be made, but yeah.
But also too, there's no projects pending either.
And that's a good point.
So we don't have a
Yeah.
project pending.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like Mr. Jones said, he'll incorporate your comments, get with Mortgage Finance Authority and legal and work on this. I know it's a priority for the commission. The other thing that besides the day-to-day work that he has also on his plate is revisions to the cannabis ordinance. So that's going to be another work study session. So he does have quite a bit on his plate between these two ordinances.
Thank you. And thank you for saying that, Manager Jaramillo. We do want to recognize, we really do recognize that you guys are super busy at the planning office. Thank you for all that you do. And by the way, we have with us at this moment is our interim planning director, and we've got Rachel Romero and Mr. Rudy Perea. Planning, thank you for being here and for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments, commissioners? Seeing none?
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Andy.
Oh, great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you all. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have completed our agenda and now it's time for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam.
Oh, and a second. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Call for the vote, please.
Commissioner Fambro,
Yes, at 9:48.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Gallegos, Vice Chair Brush,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Chair Vega.
Yes, and thank you for the teamwork, guys. Appreciate all the help. Thank you. Have a great day. Okay.